Okay, so like imagine you have this proof, right? A proof that some massive mathematical statement is true. But the catch is it would take like a supercomputer until the end of the universe to actually check if it's right.
Ooh.
What good is that proof, really?
Right.
That gets at this really fundamental question about what we even mean by proof these days.
It's something that's evolved, hasn't it? Like what a proof
Totally.
is.
It's like proof 2.0 or something. And luckily, we have this awesome lecture by Scott Aronson to help unpack it all.
Oh, he's brilliant.
Seriously, the guy's a quantum computing rock star. He dives into all sorts of mind-blowing stuff, the limits of what we can know, how quantum weirdness changes everything. This deep dive is going to be a wild ride, folks.
Definitely.
So you ready to have your assumptions challenged? Because Aronson doesn't hold back.
Let's do it.
Let's dive in. So traditionally, right, people thought about mathematical proof in these two main ways.
Okay.
You got this mystical view, kind of like a proof should resonate with some deep eternal truth.
Okay. Like you're glimpsing into Plato's world of perfect forms.
Exactly. But then there's the more practical view. A proof is just like a series of totally logical steps, right? Following these strict rules, almost like a computer program.
Feed in the axioms, turn the crank, out pops the theorem.
Boom. Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's that second view, that mechanical one, that leads to this really interesting possibility.
What if?
What if we could discover new mathematical truths without even needing any deep understanding? Like, just let the computer crunch the numbers and tell us what's what.
Interesting.
Yeah, and a famous example of this is the four-color theorem.
Right. The idea that you can color any map.
Any map,
Yeah.
using only 4 colors,
Yeah.
as long as, like, 2 regions that share a border get different colors.
Right, yeah.
Seems so simple, right?
Yeah.
But it stumped mathematicians for over a century.
Yeah.
Like, they could not crack it.
Really? Over a century? Wow.
Wow. Finally, in 1976, it was proven. But, and here's the kicker, a computer played a key role. A computer helped prove this big mathematical idea.
Which kind of makes you wonder then.
Exactly.
If a computer is helping you prove a mathematical theorem, how can you be sure that the computer's right?
Right. How do we trust the computer?
Because we've all, had a computer glitch on us.
Oh, constantly.
Yeah.
But Aronson actually flips the script a bit here. He's like, hold on. Human mathematicians make mistakes too, We miss steps. We sometimes fool ourselves. So maybe the deeper issue isn't computers versus humans. Maybe it's about how much faith we're willing to put in the laws of physics themselves.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because the computers are obviously relying on the laws of physics to function.
Totally. So it suggests that, like, even the most basic mathematical truths we hold to be true might depend on how much we trust that the universe is going to keep working the way it does.
It makes you wonder how much of what we believe is true is true.
It's a really profound question.
Yeah.
And it's from there that Aronson takes us on this wild ride through all these different ways of thinking about proof. We've got proofs that involve probability, proofs that are like conversations between like a prover and a verifier.
Yeah.
Even proofs where you can convince someone you know something, but without telling them what you know, which just sounds
Bizarre.
like magic almost. So it's like
Okay.
we're cool with proofs being, totally certain. It's either true or it's not, right?
Right.
But what if? What if a proof could be, say, like 99.99999% certain?
Okay.
Does that even make sense?
It's like almost certain.
Almost. But that tiny bit of doubt, it's not even about the logic of the proof itself, right? It's about whether the universe is going to, like, play fair.
You're saying it's a question of our faith in physics.
Totally.
Yeah.
As if we're saying, yeah, this proof is rock solid, unless the laws of physics decide to go haywire tomorrow.
Right, right. Because if we trust physics enough to, build computers in the first place and then trust the calculations they spit out,
Exactly.
maybe we should be a bit more open-minded about these proofs that are correct with a really, really high probability.
And that's where things get super interesting because it changes how we see this whole connection between like computation and proof itself.
Oh, how so?
So remember BPP, that class of problems a computer can solve where it's like super likely to get the right answer.
Right, yeah.
Aronson's point is maybe those BPP computations are kind of like proofs themselves. It's a different way of looking at it. Okay, I'll admit, even I'm feeling my brain stretch a bit here. Probable proofs, complexity classes.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Maybe an example would help, ground this a little.
Sure, yeah.
Let's talk about Merlin-Arthur proofs.
Merlin-Arthur.
Yeah, or MA proofs for short.
Sounds more like a fantasy novel than a math lecture.
Right, which is what I love about this stuff. So picture this. You've got Merlin, the all-powerful wizard, who can solve any problem instantly, like magic.
Okay.
And then you've got Arthur, who's like a regular computer or really smart person, but with limited power, you
They
know?
can't do magic.
Exactly. But Arthur needs to be convinced. He can't just, like, take Merlin's word for it.
Makes sense.
So in an MA proof, Merlin wants to prove something to Arthur. But instead of showing him the whole proof, which could be insanely complicated, he gives him this certificate, like a smaller, easier to check piece of information.
Interesting. So, like, instead of checking the whole thing, you're just checking a
A
little.
little snippet.
Got it.
But, and this is key, Arthur's not just blindly trusting the certificate. He uses a randomized algorithm, right, to spot check Merlin's work.
Ah, clever.
There's a small chance Arthur could be fooled, of course. But if you do this many, many times, the probability of Merlin getting away with a wrong answer, it gets vanishingly small.
Right.
So Arthur might not grasp the full extent of Merlin's magic, but...
He can be pretty sure he's not being tricked.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really counterintuitive.
Hmm.
Asking Merlin like a zillion questions doesn't actually make Arthur any smarter in the grand scheme of things.
Wait, really?
I know, right?
Okay.
You'd think more questions equals more
I
understanding.
assume so.
But even with unlimited questions, there's a ceiling on how much Arthur can definitively know. And that, my friend, is a fundamental limit in this world of complexity theory.
Wow.
And we haven't even touched on the truly bizarre stuff yet. Like, what about proofs that somehow convey the fact that something is true, but without revealing why it's safe?
Now you're just messing with me.
I know, right? We're talking zero-knowledge proofs. Zero-knowledge proofs, it's like, how do you even explain this? It's like whispering a secret, but somehow convincing the other person you know it without them actually learning a single thing about the secret itself.
It does sound kind of impossible when you put it like that.
Right. But Aronson gives this really cool example using graphs.
Okay, like diagrams with dots and lines.
Exactly. You know, those things. So imagine you're trying to prove to someone that two graphs are not isomorphic.
Meaning, you can't just rearrange the dots in one to make it look like the other one.
Right. There's something fundamentally different about them.
Okay, got it.
But how do you prove that without giving away any clues about what those differences actually are?
Yeah, that's the tricky part,
And
right?
it's like, how do you prove you're right without saying why you're right?
Exactly.
Okay, so here's where it gets wild. You ask the other person, the one you're trying to convince, to pick one of the graphs, right? At random.
Okay.
Then they get to, like, shuffle the dots around however they want and show you this mixed up version.
Okay.
And your job is to guess which the original graphs they started with.
Interesting. So if the graphs are truly different, you should be able to tell them apart even if one is all jumbled up.
Exactly. Like the underlying connections between the dots would give it away. But if the graphs were isomorphic, well then your chances of guessing correctly would be 50-50, right?
Yeah.
It'd just be luck.
Right.
But if you do this enough times and you keep getting it right,
It becomes statistically impossible that you're just lucky.
boom. It means you must have some way of knowing, right? Even if you never actually reveal what the actual difference is.
So the other person is convinced you know something, but they haven't learned anything new.
Exactly. They couldn't even turn around and prove it to someone else.
That's wild.
It's like a magic trick, but with serious mathematical weight behind it. And it turns out, if you assume certain cryptographic tools exist, which, you know, is a whole other rabbit hole,
Yeah.
you can actually create these zero-knowledge proofs for a ton of problems.
Even really hard ones like NP complete problem.
That's right. The ones that seem practically impossible to solve efficiently. And that's what's so amazing here, right? If you can find zero-knowledge proof for just one NP complete problem.
It's like unlocking a secret passage or something.
Exactly. Because it turns out you can convert them all into each other. So suddenly you could potentially create zero-knowledge proofs for all sorts of insanely complex problems.
Okay, I'm getting a little lost in the weeds here, but you get the idea. These things are powerful.
They're like a master key to a whole hidden world of mathematical secrets.
I like that. Okay, before we completely disappear down this rabbit hole, let's switch gears a bit. Aronson also talks about these things called PCPs, probabilistically checkable proofs.
PCPs. Catchy. Okay, I'm intrigued. What are those all about? So if zero-knowledge proofs are like, you know, mathematical magic, then PCPs are more like cheating on a cosmic homework assignment.
Cheating. Okay, tell me more.
Imagine this. You can verify a super long, complex proof just by glancing at a tiny, tiny part of it.
Wait, seriously, how tiny are we talking?
Like, no matter how long the proof is, you just need to check, say, 30 bits. That's it. and you'll know if it's right or not.
Hold on, that sounds way too good to be true. How could you possibly be sure you're not missing something?
It's all about how the proof is encoded right. It's
Yeah.
like baking this self-correcting mechanism into the structure itself. Remember that super long string of bits we talked about with the graph non-isomorphism thing?
The one that basically listed out every possible graph and whether it matched.
Yeah, that massive, unwieldy thing.
Right, okay, it was huge.
So now imagine that instead of being random, the value of each bit in that string is determined by, like, this really complex relationship to all the other bits.
Wow, so it's interconnected.
Super interconnected. It's like this giant Sudoku puzzle where if you change even one number.
The whole thing falls apart.
Exactly. So by checking just a few bits, you're kind of getting a sense for whether the whole structure holds up.
That's pretty clever. But it's still a probabilistic check, right? There's got to be some chance of error.
Well, here's the mind-blowing part. There's this thing called the PCP theorem, which is like a cornerstone of complexity theory.
Okay.
And it basically says this crazy thing. You can do this for any problem in NP. Even the most ridiculously complex proofs can be transformed into this special PCP format, where verification becomes super duper efficient.
It's like having a universal cheat detection system for math proofs. I love it.
Right. Okay, we've covered probabilistic proofs, zero-knowledge proofs, PCPs.
It's like a whole buffet of proof techniques.
Seriously. Aronson throws a lot at you in this lecture. But the best part is, he brings it all back to our favorite head-scratcher, quantum mechanics.
Oh, here we go. Back to the quantum realm. I knew we couldn't escape it.
Never. So, remember how we touched on those hidden variables earlier?
Sure.
That idea that maybe all this quantum randomness is just like our ignorance of some deeper level of reality where things actually are deterministic?
Right, right. Like Einstein's whole God doesn't play dice argument.
Exactly. So Aronson asks this super intriguing question. How complex would it be to actually calculate the entire path of a hidden variable?
Wow, to like track it through time and everything.
Exactly. And he uses this really cool thought experiment. Imagine if your whole life flashed before your eyes.
Right, okay, I'm imagining it. A little scary, but go on.
Could you, in that instant, use that information to perform a computation so powerful that it could solve problems that even the best quantum computer would struggle with?
Whoa. So our life story as like this ultimate source of computational power.
Right, and that's where this thing called DQP comes in. It stands for dynamical quantum polynomial time. Basically, it describes the kind of computational power you would have if you could access those hidden variable trajectories.
So is DQP even more powerful than regular quantum computing, like BQP?
That's the million-dollar question. And it does seem like DQP could be stronger in some ways. Like Aronson showed that with access to those hidden variables, you could crack problems like graph isomorphism, which even our best quantum algorithms still struggle with.
Huh. So does that mean hidden variables are more likely to be real?
Well, hold your horses. It's not quite that simple. DQP seems to have its own limitations too. Like it seems to struggle with certain tasks that are easy for even regular computers, classical computers, like searching through a big unsorted list.
So no free lunch in the computational universe, even if we could tap into hidden variables directly.
Apparently not. But that's what makes this stuff so fascinating to think about. Just by playing these thought experiments, by tweaking the rules of the game and seeing what happens, we get this much deeper understanding of what different computational models are capable of.
And it makes you question some pretty fundamental assumptions about, well, everything. Computation, information, even reality itself.
Right. Like Aronson said, maybe these thought experiments don't make hidden variable theories any more likely. But they do make them fail in more interesting ways. And that, my friend, is a pretty awesome takeaway from just one lecture. So if you're feeling like your brain needs a good stretch, definitely check out more of Scott Aronson's work. He's a master at making these crazy, mind-bending ideas both fun and thought-provoking. Who knows, maybe you'll be the one to finally unravel the mysteries of DQP or unlock the true power of zero-knowledge proofs.
Yeah, get out there and explore.
Until next time, happy exploring, everyone.